students, one junior, one senior every year. This coming academic year, we'll have 2 students onboarded together. After that, it will be 1 student a year. Ideally, the junior will stay for the second year and so forth. We talked about 2.5 criteria, GPA for criteria, attendance. We talked about chronic absenteeism. We didn't get very precise on that, but I think, we have to decide, do we want them to prove that they are not chronically absent, not missed more than 10% of school? So that, I don't think we have to flesh that out today. I think that the committee that is sort of selecting can have that conversation. And then in behavior, we didn't say if we wanted to have any kind of flag in the ground on a discipline record or not, or what was acceptable, what wasn't. And again, I don't know that we need to do that today, but if people have thoughts about what would keep someone from being a member of the board, is it, what type of behavior record would be prohibitive, right? And we never set that standard. Is it expulsion? Is it suspension, out-of-school suspension? Is it in-school suspension? Is it, yeah. And so.
I think we talked a little about, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought
About
we did
it
too.
being, sort of if there'd been behavioral actions against the student, that we ask for an explanation and
Right.
like dig a little deeper on what the circumstance was. But yeah, I don't think, we never did
Like,
sort of draw a
Yeah.
line.
We talked about maybe just not weighting it as much as
Right.
some of the other aspects of what we're looking
Right.
at, but that we didn't want to disqualify somebody because of one mistake they
Sure.
made 4 years ago.
I mean, we said that. What I'm
Yeah.
saying is, like, what's too much? What's enough? Right, you know what I'm saying? So
I
we don't
think,
have to decide that today, but I think that is something that a sort of smaller group, a selection committee, can refine, so. And then through the application, there's a section there where they have to describe why they're interested in the position and why this interests them, and I think that's the demonstration of interest in civic engagement. Ms. Bobo agreed to help with an online application and help with promotion and all that good stuff. Very excited about that. The community communications team will help with that. So we have, the very last thing on the second page is the timeline we'll get to in a second. So we will disseminate the application through high schools, through partners, through lots of different means. I think all of us can share with our communities. I think we will probably get, hopefully, a lot of attention from high schoolers. And there is a rubric. We can refine it if we want, but it's got all these criteria that, and so we'll have to probably have a pretty tight, let's just say we get 200 applications, right? We're not going to interview 200 people. So what gets you to the interview session? Like, what gets you to that threshold? And so I think that's another thing. We'll have to look at there is a rubric. We'll have to decide what is the score to get you to the interview. So I think it depends on who we get, how many we get, all that good stuff. And so we talked about selection committee, including board members, board staff, community partners, maybe even a student, the former student, Christian's former intern, Dawn, I think somebody
Dawn, it was
ran
Dawn.
in. Did you run into her? Yes. And she was interested in helping, so that's all good.
I love her. I love her.
And then we have a handbook for them that's pretty comprehensive, but we will also sort of create a onboarding kind of schedule and da-da-da. And they will follow the schedule of a new board member. So onboarding in August, first meeting is September. And their mentor will be the school board member that represents their home address, not their school, but their home address. Okay? And we will monitor attendance and grades at the semester. Make sure they're on track. Questions, feedback, thoughts?
Jeannie, I have one clarifying question, because I know schools will ask this. Are current student ambassadors and student leaders eligible to apply to serve as a student member?
I mean, I think you can't deny them, but I think we have to take that into consideration, right? In terms of, do we want to open up the opportunity to folks who have not perhaps led in other ways, you know? I mean, do we want to decline, say you may not if you're an ambassador? I'm not comfortable saying ambassadors may not apply. But I just think we have to be thoughtful about not choosing the student body president at a school, right? I mean, I think we need to share the love, right, in terms of other opportunities. Another question I got was, can students at charter high schools apply? And my answer would be no, because they have their own board. And so it's a different governance body. But if somebody feels really strongly, I'm open to hearing thoughts on that.
I don't see how they could speak to the experience, since we really have no purview over the activities of charter schools.
I do have a thought there. I mean, it could be that after the first year or second year iteration of this, that we then reach out to the charter operators and just offer them kind of, if you all want to do this, it could be a good experience for your students as well. So
For them to
consider
do it for
having
themselves.
Yeah. I mean, just
yeah.
making sure that they don't feel ostracized because of a parent decision versus, their own as a student.
And then yes, ma'am.
Oh, I was just going to ask, I couldn't remember if we talked about, are we going to make that rubric public so that the students will know
Yes,
what
we
to
were
look for?
going to share.
Okay,
That's a good
perfect.
point.
Just
So I
wanna make
should
sure.
make a note of that. I really believe they should be able to see what they're going to be judged on. And so, yeah, absolutely. We can make that.
Definitely affect whether they apply.
Totally. So I'll make sure we have a digital version of that goes, click here to see yes, that's great. Thank you. And then what we haven't developed is like interview questions. And so we'll have to figure that out down the road too. So, okay. Other questions, thoughts?
No, the only comment I was going to make was, I think expulsion is would be.
Hard
like-
line?
Yeah. But suspension, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that's a basis by basis conversation. If something that happened when you were in 8th grade, because you got in the heat of the moment, it's different than, doing something egregious. So I think we shouldn't allow that to be an issue, but I think expulsion would be.
I agree for it.
And then the timeline is what we kind of agreed to. And I think the only person that could, perhaps want to change this would be Ms. Bobo if she feels like she needs more time to prepare the application, to get it online and all the materials, and then we can just push everything back. We obviously have a lot of time. They don't come on board till August, so. Do we need to vote on this? Dr. Sevier?
I would suggest that you're actually going to vote on it as it relates to your policy on student board members. So as we've discussed, you're sort of having a conversation to get grounded on what you'd like. And then I think we'll work together to see what aspects of this need to be laid into the policy, and then we'll codify it as part of an amendment to that policy. And then everything else will just sort of be documents that the selection committee deems, and then if you want to make any changes to it, that seems like a logical thing to bring back when necessary, but not as a matter of an annual thing necessarily.
Right. So there is an existing student board member policy, but it's it's like 2 lines.
It's like you may have a student board member under state law. I mean,
Yeah.
which is, it's very permissive.
State policy says they may not be a voting member and they may not be paid. And so those are the 2 other things.
That's correct.
Can I ask one other question on behalf of Dr. Bellamy? I know he's thinking it. Just for our communication purposes internally and for support, what is the level of school support needed, meaning principals, counselors? Will there be any sign-off? What do they need to know? Because we also want to make sure we're communicating to them that this is happening. So is there complete board, we won't need anything from the school?
I mean,
or
I
will
think
there be some
if there's
overlap?
something that the student needs to attend during the school day, maybe that they would be allowed, if there's like a press conference or an event or a launch or something that we feel it's important then for them to come to, or a media opportunity, that the principal would be okay, on the front end, would be okay with whatever that looks like.
We won't need recommendation letters and
Yes.
sign up. We will need that.
But it could be a teacher, it could be a coach, could be a pastor.
Well, we said it didn't even have to be someone within the school that did the recommendation letter, right?
We just, it'll just help us to proactively communicate to schools about what's happening and what they might be asked to do.
Yes, to that point, we had said that the recommendation letters could be from anybody, but I think it is likely that it'll come from within our schools. To add to that, we had said, I think it was Cameo's idea, which, thank you, Cameo, for helping out so much. And she had good, once again, had good historical context and good information. And I think on that meeting, Cameo suggested that we also put inside the application information about what would happen at the end of their tenure with us. So what they could basically expect out of their time with us and what were the expectations, not only of them, but of us too, and why they would maybe want to do this besides the goodness of their heart. And so can we discuss those again?
So there is a job posting, a job description that includes some of that would go out, I think, with the application. That was in the documents I shared. But we can talk about, yeah, absolutely, and she had mentioned too, like them having to present, and we can decide if that's something we want to ask them to do. We don't have to present.
You mean as a part of the?
No, as a part of, at a board meeting.
Well, when we had student board members in the past, they gave reports about what was going on.
So we could decide how frequently.
But I think the challenge is, so here's where the challenge comes, because it becomes very school-centric. So if we only have 2 students representing 2 schools, it's going to be very school-centric reporting. Unless we ensure that as student board members, they're engaged and you have a group, right, of students that you hear from, maybe they're a part of that and we can get a report from their perspective of that engagement.
Maybe from your cabinet, your
Yeah,
student
the
cabinet.
student cabinet. So it has to be, we have to position them to give broader feedback if they're going to be of any value to the board.
Like that.
And that has representatives from all high schools, so we can talk to them.
Contribution would have been.
Look at that.
I like that.
I do too.
Yeah, the student cabinet, if they could sort of be our liaison between her cabinet and the board, and maybe lift up, students are interested in talking about these particular issues or
Yeah.
addressing these particular issues, and that'd be awesome.
I think it gives us insight into
That'd be
that
great.
from their perspective.
Okay.
So does that mean they would be expected to attend student cabinet meetings too? Like kind of just by default, if you are the,
That's an expectation, yeah.
I couldn't hear you.
I just said, does that mean they'd be attending student cabinet meetings as well? So our student school board members sort of becomes
I think so. It'd be like a liaison
yeah.
to your meetings with the
With
student.
the students, yes, okay.
Is that cool with you? Or you can think about it.
We have student representatives from every school
Yeah.
anyway, so it'll just be coordinating
Okay.
more than anything, I think. I'm looking at Dr. Springer because she usually brings us all together in great fashion. And as a matter of fact, our next one is coming up next week.
I wouldn't want to, usurp what's being
Thursday,
done by that body, but our members could be sort of,
No, have them be an ex officio member, so if
Yeah.
there's someone from that school, they're not taking away from that spot.
Right.
But their job is to only sit in to
they're just
listen.
there and kind of
And not
taking
to
it in.
interfere with your stuff, but to report back. So I think that's how you put it, they'll just be an ex
Officio.
officio member. Yeah. Yeah, and so they can just report back.
Yeah. Okay.
Got the Latin, ex officio. Okay.
See?
Anything else, Ms. Elrod?
We had said that we were going to provide a letter of recommendation. That seemed to be something we wanted to make sure that they were aware of.
When they
If I
finish.
remember from that conversation correctly. So that they were aware that there was some benefit to them potentially.
right. Upon completion. Yeah, I have that in my other notes. That's correct. Okay.
That's all I really, I mean, if somebody else remembers that conversation more thoroughly,
Oh,
that's the big thing that I remember from that.
Yeah. I remember us talking about that. Yep.
That's in my notes. I just didn't bring my laptop. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, friends. So I'll work with Dr. Severe next week on the policy, and we'll bring it to the next governance meeting for approval. All right. Let's move into our book study.
Baby, this book.
By chapter 4.
I always assume everybody did the homework, and And then they actually, if they didn't, they fake it real good. And so,
Did they read the, what is it called again?
Girl.
I still haven't read the
introduction,
foreword.
the preface. So the foreword. This chapter, obviously, so I bought this book when I came on, and so you can see all of my Post-it notes that I saved for this era. But this particular chapter really is, it's thought-provoking. It provides a level of introspection from us that, like, we have to be candid, and I think we have to actually have a conversation about how do we avoid pitfalls? Where are we doing a good job? Where could we improve on some of these things? They have quite a number of sort of examples of the way other boards have tried to manage, what would I call this? Behavior, engagement, interaction. And so I'll just open the floor, around this. One of the things I asked myself when I read this was like, do we have norms and values that we have written, published somewhere?
Well, yes, we do. We have. Now, where they are, do they need to be dusted off? I have absolutely no idea. I think the challenge that this chapter actually poses, right? So it gives examples of behavior, and we were that board, right? We were that board that was, 5 o'clock, make sure you're at home, got your popcorn, got a beer, and you're watching what's going on. And so I think the challenge becomes, challenge that we've had even just recently is how do we hold each other accountable? So, it's not about coming up with norms. I think in the 9,000 years I've been on this board, we've probably had 3 sets of norms. They've been in little frames in front of us. They've been on little cards at our place. They've been everything except tattooed on our forearm, which probably would have been more helpful. And so I don't think that that's the challenge, right? So it's not, I think everybody knows the right thing to say. And I think everyone understands even the expected behaviors. It's when you're caught in, and I hate that, I apologize, no, I don't apologize, that's a lie. I say it all the time. It's when you're caught between my role as a board member and something else. My responsiveness to a parent, my, running into somebody in a grocery store, my not agreeing with the 6 or 5 other people that voted a particular way. It's can you carry those norms consistently? Because you're always a board member. You're not a board member just when you sit at this table. You're always a board member. And the question becomes, can I adhere to those norms of how I talk about my colleagues, how I talk about the meeting, how I talk about the outcomes of a meeting, how I talk about the decisions, my thoughts about the director? Can I conduct myself with fidelity when I'm not at the table? Because it's often the behaviors that come to the table, they started away from the table. And then they eventually bubble up here through text messages or an email or through somebody just losing their patience with whatever's going on. And that's I think is what we have to wrestle with is, can I commit to that behavior, to that level of accountability 24/7 for 4 years?
Yes, ma'am.
There was so much. I told Jeannie I started highlighting, and then I was like, well, why would I even do that? I might as well just highlight everything, because for those watching, if you're still with us, we're looking at a chapter that says avoiding pitfalls, and they specifically talk about 3 different districts, one of them being in kind of central Georgia, and talking about how it used to be that their school board meetings were primetime television, as Dr. Gentry was alluding, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. And the chair was saying, well, because we're working hard to build as much consensus as possible. And it's interesting, in an interview recently, someone was interviewing us about you, the gentleman said, well, everyone just kind of thinks that Dr. Battle has you all under her thumb. And I said, that's really interesting that because we're not bickering, because we're not suggesting that she's incompetent, because we are allowing her to be the professional that she has proven herself to be as a product of MNPS and as a Nashville native, we're allowing her to be that professional. We're seeing the results of that. And because we're not picking at her or her staff or perceive that we're not picking at her or her staff, that we must be doing something inappropriate, that we're not at all doing our job. And that was just so not profound. What's the opposite of profound? Because it was so stupid to me that was the assumption. I mean, really, that was the assumption that if we're not bickering with the one person we have entrusted with the lives of 85,000 students, that something nefarious is going on. And then I connected that to this idea. It says on page 59, most board members still have to run for office, even if you don't go any further. I don't care about, I mean, yeah, fall on your sword. I think that was the first thing I said to Dr. Battle is that, you know what, I fell on my sword for the last director. I'm going to fall on my sword for you. All I need you to do is prove to me that whatever you're trying to do is what's best for kids. And she proved that like a day later. And I was like, okay, I'm following my sword for you. And I that is hard. So I don't want to speak on board members past or even make anyone at this table feel like, well, you know, kind of anxious. But it is something that we do have to consider, that there will be, I have had, unfortunately, friends or staunch supporters turn their back on me because something they asked me to do went against what my role is. I can't get your kid into MLK or Hume Fogg. I cannot and I will not. You know what I mean? I cannot change this contract to the contract that you know, for someone you know or someone that you used to work for that you want to vouch for. I don't know that person. They didn't go through the process. Things like that are hard to say in the moment because you have to just kind of stand there and grin and bear it as they call you all kind of names. But that was the thing that stuck out to me more than anything, is remembering that it is hard to be an elected board member, but that's why we get paid the nothing bucks. I'll stop there.
Claire Peters.
I mean, it was interesting because I shook my head to the norms, but it's kind of going what Dr. Gentry said. But I think when I first came on the board, I remember asking leadership, what are your norms? And I didn't get a solid answer back. So that for me, as someone who came on as an appointee, that was my first question, because in any other political body, you would go to the leadership, particularly as a freshman or a new person, saying, what's your protocols, what's your norm? So as a new person, I can come in and knowing where, especially how I came on the board. And so it's a matter of us creating that culture of saying, this is what our protocols are, this is what our norms are. But then also goes back to, because we are elected officials, people assume we are the same political body as other political bodies, and we don't act like other political bodies. So in other political bodies, like a council person can write a letter recommendation to someone applying to the fire department. But we don't do the same thing. Like, we don't write a recommendation to the teacher, to Dr. Battle, or to, you know, or to Mr. Barnes, Dr. Barnes, to say that. So some assumptions that are applied to political bodies do not apply to us because we don't function like a typical political body. And that goes back to the friction of being a board member, having oversight, and working like a, you know, does corporate governance like a corporation or a nonprofit compared to a political body, which is a checks and balance system. And that also goes back to even what Chair Bugg says, that when you're managing someone, no one actually looks at that we are managers of one person. So in my day job, as I would manage an employee, the support I will give to the employee should apply to the director of schools as a board member, but people don't see it that way too, that it's a walk between.
Strictly accountability.
Yes, accountability, but then also, am I being a good manager and providing support, whatever that support looks like, but then also holding accountable. And that's a tension of going back to the politics of being elected, but then also what's our role as a board that's oversight, not a board that's political or legislative.
Right.
And that's the part that the public, allies, and then what I'm starting to call the educational industrial complex doesn't quite understand. Like, what's our job, what's our duty, and what can we do? And what's the expectations of how we run and function? Because then people expect us to function like a corporation, and we're not a corporation either. So we have these expectations of, this is my job, this is what to do, and this is how we interact with one another. And that's the part of the difficulty as we establish leadership, as people become in leadership roles. How are we setting that culture of accountability to one another, making sure we're following the right, whether it's board policy, whether it's state law, and not policy of an organization that we have to be affiliated with, what's the presiding rules and governance that we do and how we actually implement that. And I think that's part of the constant education as we come on as new board members, but then also as we educate those who are allies, stakeholder, and other political bodies also.
Yeah, Frida brought up a point that I've thought about a lot, that it feels, what the work we do feels a lot more in line with the boards of nonprofit organizations than of political entities. And it would be very natural within that to understand that we are to be the main support system for the executive director of the organization and to bring all of the experiences and expertise that we have to the table to, and I've said this to multiple people, when I look around the table at our board, and I've worked with a lot of nonprofits in Nashville, and they would love to have a board like this. This is really a very diverse representation of skills and interests and areas of expertise. And so I think everything within this chapter emphasizes that if we all openly bring all of that to the table and aren't constantly concerned with whether or not we'll be elected, the next time, but we're just really trying to operate in that way together. And again, that whole collective voice thing, that just keeps coming up over and over and over again, that we're going to, yes, it'll be oversight, but before that, it's about support because, our director was elected unanimously or was voted unanimously into the position, attractive as it was at the time.
Yeah.
But but all that, so I just really feel like when we are at our best is when we're all speaking to those different levels of expertise and experience that we bring to the table.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So there's several figures in here, or tables as sometimes they're referred to as, that refer to different norms that are shared within the example districts. It seems like we have a consensus among the board that we think that that's a good idea, that we too also have listed norms. They're not just understood, but maybe potentially listed so that there's a clear understanding of them. If that's true, and we agreed to that as a board, would that live as suggested in this book underneath the Ethics Committee? I think that's where it was created for Atlanta. Is that something that we are wanting to do? Is that something, if we do want to do, we have to vote on? How would that even be done? How would that be organized?
So I thought about this earlier today. We didn't give one of these books to Dr. Severe and Ms. Bobo, our board office, but I think it might be good, especially if you don't mind, I would ask that we revisit the first 4 chapters during our board retreat so the entire board is there to engage in the conversation. And by then, we can maybe tap into Dr. Severe around that ethics board, standing that up so that, what did they say? So community members could actually bring like egregious acts to, and we didn't have one. And so I think that might be worthy of that conversation at the board retreat to kind of flesh that out, because I don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's any registered voter about any potential violations of the new ethics policy.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Dr. Severe, but we'll chat about that. Policy Director,
But I
appreciate you.
think it's a totally worthwhile exercise, right, to develop out a set of norms that we all agree to, adhere to, and then hold each other accountable for in the best possible way. Yes.
I'd really like that they several times enforce the idea of small freedoms within a bigger structure. And I feel like it's kind of a microcosm of what we're expecting Dr. Battle to do for her schools, and which is a microcosm of what, or a larger opposite, of what teachers are doing in their classroom with students. And so I think if we look at it as we are working together, these are our norms, this is how you be professional, this is how we expect you to behave, this is how we expect you to interact with one another, and then again, hold ourselves accountable. But But that structure has to be there. We can't just assume that everybody thinks the same and that we're all going to just automatically respond the same way, or that this is the level of professionalism that we expect, and somebody else might have this or this, and we don't know. So I really liked that idea of creating that bigger structure, and then we have the freedom to do, like what Ms. Masters said, bring our talents and our specific information and what we know about to the table to have a conversation where we listen to one another.
Go ahead. This did make me think about something that was in the first couple of pages. I just haven't been able to find it, but it was pretty much saying that when there was discord on the board, how that bubbled up in our schools, how teachers were given directives from board members, or principals were recommending ousting or hiring different individuals, and how chaotic that became, and then how disjointed the district became. I was like, are you sure you weren't writing about MNPS?
Exactly.
Are we positive that we didn't get interviewed for this? Because, I mean, I can take on a smaller scale, teaching at one school with 3 or 4 different principals across 3 or 4 different years, it changes everything for the students and the teachers. How dare we think that that's not going to be the case when you change leadership across a district? So just something that it just really stuck with me. I just wish I could find the exact verbiage, because the example that they gave was so detrimental to those students.
So, the thing, Ms. Tyler, that you're talking about is something that's come up over the years. And, I always, my federation moment for the MNPS school board is that whatever those norms are and whatever norms get embraced by the current board, are they clear? It causes someone to think twice about running. If we adhere to them with fidelity, people need to know what's expected of them if they join this board, right? So one of the many reasons I'm sure that people thought about when they said we'd run in odd and evens is that there would be that historical knowledge, that holder of the culture, right, of the board. And that should be the goal, is that if we develop norms, again, so this is not a new exercise. I'm not to steal anybody's thunder, but this is not a novel idea for this board. All right, so we come up with the norms, and great examples here in chapter 4. We come up with a set of norms. We need to really understand what that looks like. In talking about why is that a norm, know why that's important to the role of a board member, the support of a director of schools, and the eventual outcomes for our students. And then again, be willing to embrace them 24/7 as a board member. Again, so that the person who's sitting out there in the audience or watching on television, riveted, in thinking about running for the school board, the one question we want them to ask themselves is, can I do that? Can I adhere to those norms? Because again, somehow we've got to stop I'm coming to the board to change everything. I'm coming to the board to turn things upside down. I'm coming to the board to stop them from being a rubber stamp board. I'm coming to the board with all these missions of disruption, right? They may call it improvement, they may call it making things better, but it's disruptive. And so, for me, that would be the ultimate, is that the norms are developed, they're embraced, but they create that lens through which people have to decide, can I do that? And can I be a part of this body and support those values and those norms?
We haven't heard from my two friends over here to my right, if anyone would like to.
I think for me, coming onto the board and looking where the board was 4, 5, 6 years ago, it's changed, and also having experience with dealing with the new Atlanta board. And so I can respect that we have a lot of internal conversations where we get to know each other and understand where we're coming from, and it's not a lot of agendas. And it's one board member who texts me and calls me a lot when I'm not doing something that's the right thing, and I can appreciate that because it's coming from a good place. And so reading this and knowing where we started as a board and where we are now, I can appreciate it.
And I'll just, add, just thinking about the title of Chapter 4, Avoiding Pitfalls, It is the daily, the daily work. But more than anything, in reflecting on what I read in chapter 4 and hearing just the reflections of the board, it reminds me of the critical role we play and in avoiding those pitfalls on behalf of the district, and how we are the true advocates for the work that's happening across the district. And it was also a reflection for me as I read some of the examples, particularly in Georgia, the role that the director plays in working closely with board members to avoid such pitfalls. I know internally we have established norms. It was part of the reason we had our go at our core tenets. And to Dr. Gentry's point, that first one in re-envisioning central office as a support hub, I want individuals coming to central office to think twice about that, because we're here to serve our schools, and that's a mind shift and a transformation in the way in which we go about our work. And so it was with lots of intention, because we do have to consider the way in which we have been, and just because it's the way it's been doesn't mean it has to be the way we move forward. And so just a few reflections of my reading, and then just sitting back and have an opportunity to listen to the board around how these words in this chapter have impacted you and your perspectives.
So we are at 5 till, and I'm going to go ahead and conclude the meeting, knowing that we will revisit some of these themes. And so my big takeaway so far is we have expressed a commitment to learning about how to talk about data and shared definitions and shared conversations around measurement and outcomes and all the things that we do to define success for our district. And the second one is really coming up with a shared set of norms. I think those are really good, so far really good, sort of stake in the ground on coming out of this. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this meeting. Thank you for, do I get to
Beat it again.
Okay.
Beat it.